Hello everyone. In this video, I will be helping students to break down difficult sentences in early modern poetry. To help, I will be using Shakespeare's sonnet number 20. So let's get started. During Shakespeare's time, educated men were trained rigorously in grammar and rhetoric. As such, their writings tended to reflect what they learned in school. To more easily grasp the meaning of early modern writings, students will need to brush up on some of the basics of grammar. For example, reviewing the parts of speech will help a lot, like noun, pronoun, verb, adjective, preposition, conjunction, interjection, and adverb. But first, let's start with finding the sentence's main idea. To do this, you'll need to locate the sentence's subject and its verb. Next, you'll need to cut out the non-essential information from the sentence so that it doesn't distract from the main idea. Although this information is important to the poem and its idea, when trying to determine the essential meaning of the sentence, these phrases can often distract students rather than help. And so it helps to forget them at least at first. We'll bring them back into the sentence later, but for now we'll just start with finding the sentence's subject and verb. When looking for the sentence's subject and verb, it can help to write out the sentence in prose rather than poetry. Doing so will make it easier to see them as sentences rather than as poetic lines. Before we start dissecting Shakespeare's sonnet line by line, I'll read it for you here first. In Sonnet 20, the speaker is addressing a figure who's typically called the youth by scholars. The youth is a beautiful young man who has inspired Shakespeare to write sonnets. This is an unusual tactic because sonnets were traditionally written to women, not to men. In this sonnet, the speaker has created a bit of a joke for the youth. And now, Shakespeare's Sonnet 20. A woman's face with nature's own hand painted hast thou, the master mistress of my passion. A woman's gentle heart, but not acquainted with shifting change, as is false woman's fashion. An eye more bright than theirs, less false and rolling, gilding the object whereupon it gazeth. A man in hue, all hues in his controlling, which steals men's eyes, and women's souls amazeth. And for a woman wert thou first created, till nature, as she wrought thee, fell a-doting. And by addition me of thee defeated. By adding one thing to my purpose, nothing. But since she pricked thee out for women's pleasure, mine be thy love, and thy love's use their treasure. When locating sentences within sonnets, it helps to follow the punctuation. The first clause ends at the semicolon in the second line. I've highlighted it here to make it easier to see. And so the first clause that we will be discussing includes the first two lines of the sonnet. The first step is to write out the sentence in prose. In other words, we need to take it out of the poetic context. And that is exactly what I have done below. Writing out the sentence in prose will make it easier to find each part of the sentence that we need in order to determine its meaning. Next, we need to look for the sentence's subject. In this case, the subject is a woman's face. Next, we need to find the sentence's verb. For this sentence, the verb is hast. The sentence uses a passive construction, so the thou the speaker is addressing is the object of the verb rather than the subject. This is intentional on Shakespeare's part. He wants the youth to be both his own love object and the object of the sentence. The grammatical structure just reinforces the speaker's desire. And now we need to forget the non-essential parts of the sentence. The prepositional phrase, with nature's own hand painted, is not part of the sentence's essential meaning. It is merely an adornment to the phrase, a woman's face. The phrase, the master mistress of my passion, isn't a positive. It is defining who thou is in the sentence. But, as with the prepositional phrase, it is non-essential to the sentence's meaning. And here is the rewritten version of the sentence that expresses the main idea. You have a woman's face. In this new version, I have moved the you to the subject position in the sentence to make it clearer. And finally, we want to add back in the non-essential phrases. Now the rewritten version reads, "You, the master mistress of my passion, have a woman's face with nature's own hand painted." Now that we've finished the first clause in the sonnet, we can move on to the next. This section is more descriptive material of the youth. All of this is still part of the sonnet's first sentence. And so, we will move on to the next independent clause. "And for a woman wert thou first created." As before, we will write out the sentence in prose to take it out of the poetic context. Next, look for the subject. For this sentence, the subject is a woman. For the moment, we are going to forget the preposition for. Usually, the object of a prepositional phrase cannot be the subject of a sentence. However, based on the context clues from the rest of the sonnet, the preposition for is not being used in the same way we use it today. Now, look for the verb. In this sentence, the verb is wert. Again, we have another passive sentence, an echo of the first sentence in its placement of the youth in the sentence's object position. For now, we next need to forget the non-essential parts of the sentence. The conjunction "and" is pretty much the only non-essential part of this sentence, since it is linking this sentence's idea with the previous sentence's idea. The phrase "first created" appears to be essential, but its placement in the sentence confuses the sentence's meaning. Even so, the verb phrase is attached to thou. When the sentence is rewritten so that it has a more modern syntax, we have "you were first created as a woman." Based on the context clues from the rest of the poem and the sentence's syntax, for is being used like as instead of for. The next clause appears in this section. Now that we have worked through the simpler sentences, we can tackle a longer sentence. Once again, the first thing we want to do is write out the sentence in prose to take it out of the poetic context. Next, we want to look for the subject. Till, which is an abbreviation for until, is a subordinating conjunction. Thus, this clause is a dependent clause that relies on the previous clause to be considered complete. Shakespeare uses a semicolon to connect the clauses, which is not typical punctuation for complex sentences. However, he uses a lot of commas in each of the linked clauses, so we need something stronger to indicate the end of one clause and the start of another. The verb phrase "fell a-doting" is informing the reader that nature, here personified, fell in love with the subject of the poem, the youth. The conjunction "and" is adding another verb phrase to the sentence's main idea. Nature fell a-doting. The phrases highlighted in purple are prepositional phrases. Recognizing them can help you find buried subjects within the sentence. Look for both the preposition and its object. The verb defeated is still attached to nature, and so the sentence has two verbs. Nature has both fell and has defeated. The speaker, me, is the object of defeated. Notice how the word order has been flipped. Once again, we need to forget the non-essential parts of the sentence for now. The phrase "as she wrought thee" is non-essential because it is describing what nature was doing when she fell for the youth. She was creating him. Nothing seems out of place grammatically, But we can use context clues to figure out what it is doing in the sentence after we have rearranged all the other elements. Rewritten so that the sentence has more modern syntax, we now have nature fell a-doting and defeated me by adding one thing, nothing to my purpose. Now that the sentence is rewritten, we can see that nothing should come before to my purpose. Essentially, nature added something to the youth when she was first creating him, and that one thing is nothing to the speaker's purpose. In other words, his desire for the youth is frustrated by the one thing because his desire cannot use that one thing. Grammatically, nothing to my purpose is an appositive. It is redefining what the one thing means from the preceding phrase. You may have noticed that I have not explained the awkward prepositional phrase of the yet. The preposition of can denote ownership. For example, the name of the restaurant is Chili's. In the prepositional phrase, restaurant possesses name. You can also recognize the possession in a revised version of the sentence. The restaurant's name is Chili's. Therefore, me is demonstrating ownership of the in Shakespeare's sentence. The clause could read, nature defeated me of thee. In other words, nature has defeated the speaker from having or owning the youth. And now for the final sentence in the sonnet. As before, we're going to write out the sentence in prose and take it out of the poetic context. Next, we're going to find the subjects. There are three subjects in this sentence: she, thy love, and thy loves. The pronoun she is still referring to nature. Next, we need to look for the verbs. The verbs in this sentence are pricked, be, and use. And now we're going to do something a bit different. We're going to look for the verbs objects. And so the verb phrases include pricked thee out, mine be, and use their treasure. Now it's going to be helpful to find the conjunctions. The conjunctions for this sentence are but, since, and. Now we're going to identify prepositional phrases. The prepositional phrase in this sentence is for women's pleasure. Next, we need to rewrite the sentence so that it uses modern syntax. The rewritten sentence is, but since nature pricked you out for women's pleasure, your love be mine, and your love's use their treasure. In other words, because nature gives the youth a penis, the one thing, the speaker will settle for his platonic love while women can enjoy his body. Like today, prick was a euphemism for penis. And so, when breaking down sentences in early modern poetry, you need to refamiliarize yourself with the parts of speech, identify them in each of the sonnet sentences, and rewrite the sentences until they conform to modern syntax. Performing these steps will make it much easier for you to understand early modern poetry. Thank you for watching, and please let me know if you have any questions.